Welcome back to Talk of the Town. I'm your host, Steve Noxon, and we have on the phone with us now State Representative Rob Sampson. He currently represents the 80th District. How are you today, Mr. Sampson?
I am doing great, Steve. Glad to join you.
Always a pleasure to have you on, sir. It's a pretty exciting week up in Hartford. Lots of things happening coming out of committee, and so I appreciate you taking time out to speak with us and give us an idea of what's happening up in Hartford. The first big deal, the Legislative Committee has voted to ban both bump stocks and ghost guns. Perhaps you could give us an idea of what that is going to, how that's going to work.
That's a good question. I honestly don't know if these bills will end up making it to the floor, since there was quite the dust-up in the committee, because I actually called out the Democrats for playing politics rather than being concerned with the public safety of our citizens. I offered an amendment to the bump stock bill, which I think is been raised for political purposes, not necessarily because there's any tremendous desire or reason to ban a part of an accessory to a firearm when we already regulate the firearm. So I brought to the attention of the committee that there are things that we could do, like start funding the statewide firearms trafficking task force, which is basically an inter-police department network that we had for just 1 year, the year after Sandy Hook was funded to the tune of $1 million. And then after that, amazingly, it disappeared from the budget. That task force is their job is to cut down on illegal firearms that are trafficked, particularly in our cities, which lead to the tremendous number of violent murders that we have in Hartford, New Haven, and Bridgeport. And I think it ought to be funded. So I challenged them to fund that. I challenged them to provide grants for school resource officers in our towns, and I challenged them to come up with funding for mental health beds for people that might fit the description of someone similar to the killer in Florida. Mm-hmm. And you know how I proposed to fund that? I proposed to fund it by stopping the bailout of Hartford. So I gave them a clear choice. What's more important, bailing out the city of Hartford's bankruptcy problems or funding the safety of our cities and our schools? And sadly, it failed on a party line vote.
Now, I've got a question for you on this bump stock ban. We already ban automatic weapons. I mean, for the most part, it's extremely difficult to get one, and almost virtually impossible. Why this seems like a simple thing to do. I mean, I understand, look, you ban this, people are going to figure out other ways to do what they want to do, as I've mentioned before in the air. You can use your belt loop, you can use rubber bands, you can do all kinds of things to make these guns act and fire more rapidly. But this seems to be a no-brainer. Why would you want to allow this to be able to be used to imitate an automatic weapon?
Well, there's a few different issues at stake, Steve. First and foremost, a bump stock by itself is just a piece of plastic. And as you said, the act of bump firing a firearm is simply it's hard to describe without actually demonstrating it, but basically it's allowing the recoil of the firearm to make the trigger bump up against your finger to fire the gun again. And as you said, it can be done lots of different ways. In fact, you can do it without any implement whatsoever. A bump stock is a piece of plastic that you can attach to a rifle that will give you the potential to make it easier to bump fire a gun. I think it's a ridiculous item. I don't think it's something any self-respecting gun enthusiast, whether they're into target shooting, certainly, because it's not going to make you more accurate, or hunting, or even self-defense, or any reason. However, I also recognize that it's not my choice to decide what other people find interesting. I mean, some people might say that there's no use for cars that go over 100 miles an hour, but I think that might offend a lot of people if legislatures across the country were saying you can't have this. And further, the thing is that we've never had a crime committed in our state. There's been no convictions in the entire nation for anyone using a bump stock in a crime. There is speculation that it was used in Las Vegas. The thing is, if we ban that in Connecticut, you can simply cross the border into another state to get one. It's not an effective ban. The other thing is that it's something that's being handled on the federal level. It's likely to be banned and classified as a machine gun on the federal level in the next month or two. The Democrats want this issue for politics. They know that people like me, who stand for the Second Amendment are going to have a difficult time voting to ban anything that might qualify as a gun part or an accessory, whether it's good or not, because I think it takes us down the road of saying it's okay for legislatures to begin to ban private property from people.
I mean, I understand that argument, and trust me, I can see both sides of this. But I think that the difficulty is when you ban an item like that, it doesn't mean that someone can't make it themselves in their basement, right. Or they're going to, like you say, go out of state to get it. And so, the actual act of banning it strikes me as rather weak to begin with.
Yeah, and the thing is, Steve, the bill, by the way, was much more broadly written than that, too, and by design. Again, they're trying to create a political issue. They want folks like me to vote no because they want to be able to beat us up over the fact that somehow we don't care about the lives of children because we won't ban some inanimate object. And it's the most ridiculous and absurd thing that there is. And I want to use every opportunity I can to call them out to say they're just playing politics rather than actually caring about fixing these things. I gave them the opportunity to do so, and they failed to.
Now, another item on this agenda from this legislative committee was this item called referred to as a ghost gun. Perhaps you could describe what that is?
Well, that's a good question, too. Again, the first bill on bump stocks banned anything that would make the ability of a gun fire faster. But we heard testimony that could include everything from having somebody modify a trigger to a firearm or even adding lubricant. So it's just poorly written. The ghost gun bill, even worse. Essentially, it says that anything that could be turned into a firearm it can be classified as a firearm and therefore banned.
What?
And we couldn't get any real answers to whether or not that includes the big old boulder in my front yard because it contains a little bit of iron. It's ridiculous. Again, broadly written to make an issue out of something that is a non-issue. No ghost gun has ever been recovered from the scene of a crime, ever.
Well, I mean, you make a really good point on this, too. When they write this legislation, I mean, it should be really simple. We want to ban this one particular item. Let's talk about that. But they don't. They expand that out and they go, oh, and by the way, on top of that, we want this and this and this and this and this. And that, it's almost as though they're putting in poison pills to make it so that those bills fail. That
is exactly correct. Well, I mean, they want our no votes is what they want. My dear friend, Representative Doug Dubitsky, a fellow strong Second Amendment advocate and conservative, willing to acknowledge the attempt of the committee to try and ban ghost guns, even though he objected as much as I did, and went so far as to correct their bill to achieve the stated goal, which is to ban the item that they're really are trying to get at, which is a partially machined gun part that is available online. And he wrote the bill for them and offered that as an amendment. And, of course, they voted it down. And it's just shocking to me. It showed and demonstrated very clearly that the goal was not actually to pass the legislation that they claimed. It's simply to get Republicans on the record voting against these two gun control items for a political issue.
Now, I've did a little bit of research on this, and one of the things that I learned is that you need, certainly people buy parts to repair items on their gun that may have broken, or like a trigger guard or a new hand, whatever. But it's illegal to buy the actual frame of a pistol online. You can buy all the parts you need to fix an existing weapon, but it's illegal to buy that frame. So you could buy all the parts that you want, but you could not build a gun out of them because you supposedly, if you're adhering to the law, can't get that frame. That's illegal to buy already.
Yes, well, I mean, it's not illegal to buy. It's illegal to
sell.
Well, I mean, that's what is considered the firearm. So in Connecticut, because we require a background check and pistol permit, you would need to have those things before you could purchase that part.
Okay, so I may be saying illegal. I'm misstating this. You can buy it, but you still have to have the same gun license and prove that you are able to get this gun, just like you would if you went and bought a complete weapon.
Exactly. I would equate it to like buying a car without tires or an engine or anything. The car has the serial number on it. That's what identifies it as a car. And the same thing with firearms. As you said, in a handgun, it might have a frame. in a rifle, many modern rifles are modular in nature. They are put together, assembled out of a collection of things. The lower part of the frame that houses the trigger and things is typically called a receiver, and that is the part that has a serial number on it, and that's what's identified as a firearm and is regulated. All the other parts, the grip and the barrel and everything else, is useless without that part, and therefore can be purchased by anyone.
There was a proposal by Senator Blumenthal recently about requiring a permit to purchase ammunition. Do you see that getting any traction here in the state?
Well, we already have that as a law in Connecticut. It passed in the wake of the Sandy Hook tragedy. There was a bill in the Judiciary Committee this week to actually change the ammo certificate, which is required to purchase ammunition in Connecticut, to allow you to purchase a lifetime version, and that failed. I object to that because, again, ammunition is also useless without a firearm. And if we're already regulating firearms, why are we making it difficult for the purchase of ammunition? If someone is a target shooter and, they spend a lot of time at the range and they want to send their spouse to stop by Walmart to pick up some ammunition for them, what is the harm in that? If that person is already restricted from owning a firearm and they're just, buying, I suppose you could throw the bullets at someone, but I don't think that's very effective.
So basically what you're saying is Senator Blumenthal's proposal is kind of redundant?
Yeah, most of these things are not effective. I mean, what's so funny is Marco Rubio took a tremendous amount of heat after the Parkland massacre because he said that the gun control efforts that have been passed across the country were not effective. And I agree with him. He is right. In fact, the Washington Post, not exactly a conservative paper, went and fact-checked that claim. And they agreed. They determined that the gun control legislation that's passed across the country is simply ineffective at stopping these types of things because, I'll use two examples. First and foremost, universal background checks. Now, I would support universal background checks and have, but I will tell you that it is not the end-all, beat-all because universal background checks are not universal. They are voluntary. Steve, if you and I are going to exchange a firearm, because we're law-abiding, decent citizens, we're going to go down to the gun store, and we're going to pay our fees and fill out the paperwork, and they're going to do the background check, and then we'll be on our way and have exchanged the firearm. But imagine criminals that are up to no good, that are about to commit some horrible crime, rob a liquor store or something like that, and they exchange a firearm. They're not doing that. They're going to do it in the Walmart parking lot, at 3 a.m., and they're certainly not going through a background check.
Well, that's the argument that I make about it all the time. This whole quote-unquote gun show loophole it doesn't exist because people are going to if people want to exchange firearms, they could do it in their living room. You're talking Walmart at 3 a.m. I'm talking in their living room and over dinner at 6 in the afternoon. If it happens outside of anybody else seeing it and the two parties agree, okay, you shut up, I'll shut up, nobody says a word, well, enacting a new law isn't going to change that.
That's right. Criminals are not going to pay attention to laws. The other thing is the magazine capacity. I tell people this all the time. We have a law in Connecticut, and a few other states have it too, that says that you can only carry 10, rounds of ammunition in your handgun. If you have if you're a law-abiding person, you have a carry permit, and you're following the law, you can only put 10 rounds in your gun. Now, most modern handguns take a lot more rounds than that, maybe 17. And of course, most people, like myself, I have a pistol permit. If I ever carry my firearm, which I don't do as often as I probably should, I would only put 10 rounds in it. But just ask yourself for a second. Same guy who's about to go rob that liquor store, he's sitting in the car just before he goes in there to commit this crime, and he's loading his gun. Does anyone really think he's going to stop at 10? It's just absurd. Yeah. So why have this law? Because the only people that are going to have 10 rounds is maybe the guy at 3 in the morning who has to defend his family when, 3 or 4 people break into his house and attack him. It's just these things don't make any real sense. They are sound bites and they're political issues, and the left is very, very good at equating gun control with you're caring for the safety of children. And that's just ridiculous. The same people that are law-abiding citizens who are against these gun control laws are responsible for stopping countless crimes. They have a lower crime rate than the average population, and many of them are the same people that would run into a building to stop such a thing from happening.
Well, I don't mean to make light of the situation, but it turns out that after the events of this past week, PETA has a higher body count than the NRA because of what happened out in California. But the interesting aspect of this is that, you know, all of these laws that people want to pass, all of these laws that people want to enact, like you say, the criminals aren't going to adhere to those laws. And there was a great video, it's gone viral, of this gentleman down, I think it was in South Carolina, but I could be wrong. I don't know where it is. Have you seen this, where this person is standing before his town committee going, wait a second, I am the majority. I am a part of an organization. I'm a gun owner. I'm a part of a group of people who, the vast majority of which have never broken a single law. And I'm the one you come after to restrict my rights every time somebody else breaks a law.
Yeah, no, the NRA is a civil rights organization. They exist for the purpose of protecting people's civil rights. They have nothing to do with criminals. I don't know what the crime rate is among NRA members, but I guarantee you it is much, much lower than the average population. And it's ridiculous for the left to try and attack a lobbying organization that is interested only in protecting our Bill of Rights. And every citizen, you know, that's a funny thing about this. You know, people are clamoring to have things banned. What they don't realize is that they're asking for lawmakers like myself to take their rights away. That is quite interesting for someone like me who appreciates American history, has a background and knowledge of understanding why our Bill of Rights exists. It exists to prevent the government from restricting the individual liberties of free, sovereign citizens. And I wish people understood our history, the value of freedom, how important it is to be an American, and to understand that when we are telling our governments to take our rights away, we are basically, shaming the founding of this country.
My wife and I are watching Hawaii Five-0 on Netflix. I know this sounds like I'm going off on a tangent here, but I'm really not. And we watched an episode last night where it was about gun control and gun rights and all of this. And the two main characters were in the car arguing about it. And one of them is a police officer going, well, if we just take all the guns away from the bad guys, then all the good guys won't need guns. And his partner looks at him and goes, right. And then we'll stop all discrimination. We'll stop all crime. We'll stop all of, everybody from hating each other. And then we'll all have a pet unicorn. You're not going to get the guns out of the hands of the bad guys.
Yeah, or the good guys, to be honest with you. I mean, Steve, there are only two kinds of people out in the world that own guns. They are criminals and non-criminals. And guess what? Neither party is going to give up their firearms. The criminals are certainly not going to cooperate with bans, and the law-abiding citizens are not going to cooperate with governments that want to take away their ability to defend themselves. It's a natural right we have. The founders recognized that we had a natural right as free citizens to defend ourselves and our property. The Second Amendment exists for that purpose. What can I tell you beyond that?
Yeah, no, I mean, it was just really funny to see that on a show that aired on CBS. I mean, I know it was a fictional show, but it was just really interesting to see this back and forth between them because he was trying not to ridicule him. It was kind of humorous, but even my wife looked at me and he goes, yeah. Yeah, no. Bad guys are going to break the law. It's why they're bad guys. Speaking with Rob Sampson, he's a state representative here in Connecticut. A couple of other items came out. I want to hit on them very, very quickly. Number one, the tolls. It seems to be moving forward.
Yeah, I heard there was a party line vote to pass tolls out of the Transportation Committee. It's disappointing. Between you and me, I don't serve on the committee, so I don't know the exact details. But I'm happy to talk to you about tolls at any length. It is not the answer. A toll is just another way for the state government to raise revenue, to tax us more. Any notion that somehow it's a way to tax people from out of state to solve our budget problems is foolhardy. That is not true. The impact will fall on Connecticut citizens. They are not just going to put these tolls on the borders. They are going to be everywhere. And they're not going to be as cheap as people would project either. They want to do congestion tolling that sometimes costs $10, $20, $30 for a toll.
Well, my fear is that even if it starts out small, that's just the camel's nose in the tent. The second issue is the Hartford bailout you mentioned earlier. Were you aware that this, when you signed off on the budget agreement back in October, that this was not going to be a 2-year thing? This was going to be a 20-year bailout?
Well, first and foremost, I did not vote for the state budget that passed in October. And I said on the floor a number of reasons why I didn't vote for it. And one of them is that whether people knew that this agreement to bail out Hartford actually reached into the hundreds of millions of dollars and went out beyond the 2 years of our normal state budget or not, they did know that we put in there $40 million per year to bail out Hartford in the next 2 years. And for me, that was plenty, along with money for the XL Center and countless other lack of priorities to vote against the budget. So I don't know. I was upset enough about $80 million.
Yeah, I've talked to a couple of other reps here in the last week or so, and actually Dr. Pettit said that nobody knew that this was going to be a 20-year thing, and so it's really surprising that this is coming around. Now, there is supposedly going to be some oversight put on the city of Hartford as part of that agreement, I guess is a bad word. Does that change your thoughts on this at all?
Well, I think that the city of Hartford definitely needs oversight, but I also don't think it's the responsibility of smaller, well-run towns like the towns that I represent and hope to represent if I become a state senator to bail out a very poorly run large city that doesn't seem to have any real desire to fix itself. I think we're only making things worse if we're going to reward them with money that comes from elsewhere.
Representative Rob Sampson, always a pleasure to talk to you, sir. We look forward to having you back. Keep us up to date on what's happening up in Hartford, okay?
Anytime, Steve. Thank you very much.
Take care. Have a great weekend.